Hello, everyone. Great to see the numbers rising and the people joining this this virtual room. Please pop over to the chat and let us know who you are and say hello. Later, that's the place where you can ask all your super difficult questions. And then we're going to do our best to answer those. So if you've been to our webinars previously, then you know that at the bottom of the chat box, you can change the to field to all panelists and attendees. Please do that so all the attendees can also see what you, who you are and what you're saying. If you don't do that, it's only the panelists who can see what you are all about. We've got a slide up at the back, so you know that you're in the right place and in the right webinar. And you can also already see some of the friendly faces that you'll be hearing from in the next hour. I'm really looking forward to it. Great to see Val, great to see Leanne and Nick in the room. Georgie is here as well. Rebecca. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I think you've made a good choice, a good way to spend an hour from 2 to 3 on a Thursday. I'm actually going to stop sharing, and because I don't want to waste too much time doing hellos and introductions. Some people will probably still pop in, but they will have the recording for all the nuggets in the beginning. So let me rather go to the official opening. So in Mercer's 2021 Global Talent Trends study, 56% of organizations said that identifying new skills and capabilities for a post-COVID world is a top priority. In the next hour, we're going to look at the race to reskilling. So what is best practice? What are South African companies doing? And if you're overwhelmed by the challenge, what small practical steps can you take to start reskilling your organization? So a very warm welcome again to this webinar. My name is Joel Roerich, and I'm the Managing Director of CHRO South Africa. You probably expected your favorite host here, my good friend Njabulo and Kabinde, but he managed to combine beating COVID-19 and becoming a father in the last few days. So he's focusing on the things that matter most in life. I was already saying in the beginning, please say hi in the chat, introduce yourself, and let us know where you work. And at the bottom, select all attendees and panelists before you start chatting, so all the attendees can also see what you're all about. And this is the place where you can pop in all your questions. Please, you don't have to wait until the end. You can, we will collect questions sort of as the webinar goes along, and we'll pose those towards the end. So in this webinar, we're fortunate to have 4 absolute experts alongside me. I will unpack the topic and share the insights and practical advice. So let me introduce them. Njabulo Mashigo, CHRO at Vodacom, South Africa. It's really great to have her back in South Africa after her stint at Heineken in the Netherlands. We've got Elizabeth Rashidi, HR Director at Tiger Brands, who also spent a year at Vodacom in the past, if I'm not mistaken. We've got another Elizabeth Waititu, all the way from Nairobi, HR head at Jubilee Insurance, which happens to be the biggest insurer in East Africa. And first, we're going to hear from Tesantha Naidoo, Senior Associate at Mercer. But to get you started in the meantime, I'm just going to put up a poll question quickly. So let me make sure I press the right buttons here. Launch polling, that must be the one. So you should see a poll now. Please, it's a guessing poll. So this is called gamification, I think. So please read the question. What percentage of employees say that they are ready to reskill? And then there's only one right answer. That's normally there's an open-ended question, but there's only one right answer, and Tesantha is going to reveal what the right answer is in a bit. Meanwhile, let me just give Mercer a bit of a shout out. They've really thrown their weight behind the HR and our network and CHRO South Africa community. Lots of the work that we do and that you can also enjoy every week would not be possible without their support. So of course, this webinar is also sponsored by Mercer. So Tesantha, let's have a look at the results quickly. I'm going to end the polling and share it with everyone. 42% of people think it's 43%. That's interesting. Okay. I must say it correctly. 43% think it's 42%. There you go. So that's the most popular answer. So we're going to hear from you if that's correct. And I'm handing over to you for you to share your screen now.
Thanks, Joel. Please let me know when you can see my screen.
Perfect.
There we go. So hi to our panelists and all of our attendees. Thank you for joining us today as we discuss how we can transform our workforces to reskill for this new world economy. Now, we can all agree that last year we entered a new world of transformation as the agenda, and we're still very much on that agenda. Now, if we look at how we did things in the past versus how we have to do things now, we can no longer embark on transformations in isolation. So it's no longer a case of let's do a cultural transformation, let's do a business transformation, let's do a workforce transformation. It's become an interconnected imperative. So Mercer partners very closely with the World Economic Forum, and skilling and reskilling across the world is very high on our agenda. And some of the stats that came out, one in particular, is that over 60% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa is under the age of 25. Now, that makes us the world's youngest population. And what that means for organizations is that they actually need to start investing in development much earlier on. Now, when we talk about accelerating this new shape of work, you'll see by 2025, 85 million jobs will be displaced by the shift in division between the labor of humans and machines. Now, this is not necessarily a negative stat because you'll see that 97 million new jobs will be created as a result. But what this means for you as organizations is that over 50% of employees will need to be reskilled as a result of this change. Now, if we look at the number one challenge to transformation, you'll see it's a lack of workforce capability and skills. Now, Joel mentioned that we do run a global talent trend survey annually, and you'll see globally only 2 in 5 HR professionals actually know what skills exist in their organizations today. And only 9% of organizations were actually formally making an effort to monitor the demand and supply of skills in the market. Now, in 2019, it is estimated that $900 billion was lost in revenue as a result of failed digital transformations. Now, if we look at how the world of skills has evolved over time, you'll see there's been quite a dramatic shift. Now, we moved from the traditional models of just focusing on our jobs and our task and just doing what was listed on a job description was enough to give you a great performance review. It was linked to rewards. And then we evolved to roles which were more accountability focused, and we created career paths. And then you'll see as we move to more leading practices, we started taking into consideration the career experience for employees, and we started assigning skills linked to roles. Now, if we look at the future focus models and the world of skills and skills transformation, you'll see it's more assignment focused, meaning that employees need to get into a more consultative mindset rather than looking at the job description and just performing based on the task listed in the job descriptions. So, pre the pandemic, we did ask executives what percentage of the workforce did they believe could adapt to the new world of work. So I can't see the chat, but I'm going to give you 30 seconds to guess a percentage. And Joel, you can call it out, and then I'll reveal the stat.
Bring up the poll again. We've
Okay,
got some. We have some guesses in the chat. We've got 60%.
good. Yes,
We've got
60. Okay.
65, 10, 60, 20. We're going a bit all over the place. So 30.
Okay, so it was
So
actually
basically, Tesantha, the group doesn't know.
and neither did we, right? So, and the stat is actually 40%. So only 40% executives believe that only 40% of the workforce could adapt. Now, earlier Joel asked in the poll what percentage of employees believe they could reskill. I believe the answer was 42, 43% of the audience answering 42%. Answer is actually 87%, meaning that employees are ready to reskill and want to reskill, but the question is, are organizations prepared to help them reskill? Now, if we look at the new world of work and the new demands with the new set of skills, you'll see that 52% of companies actually plan on increasing their spend on digital transformations. Now, a lot of companies are already on this journey. However, if we look at the top transformation challenges, you'll see that the number one challenge is that people have too many priorities at the moment, and it's distracting. The second one being employee exhaustion, given the blended working lives. So, what this meant is we typically had an hour to travel to work, we had an hour to travel back home, and now we're expected to actually start working during those times. We set up back to back meetings, we don't actually take a break, and that's leading to burnout and exhaustion. Now, how do we balance a focus on survival and lack of budgets? HR, from the time I know I've started working, has always been fighting to get a budget, and it's usually minimal because HR budgets are very rarely prioritized or were really prioritized. But now organizations are sitting back and actually realizing that this is becoming more and more important for them to stay relevant. And you'll see the fourth one being, again, the lack of workforce capability and future skills. Now, if we look at executives again and the executives that participated, you'll see that the number one priority is investing in the future of learning and workforce reskilling, transforming talent practices, and improving how we leverage the broader talent ecosystem. So when we talk about build, buy, borrow, or bot, is this something that's being discussed in your organization, or are you still comfortable with the skills that you have in your organization today? Now, agile and agility, also another buzzword together with flexibility. And you'll see the most important factors to increase agility in the organization included agile teaming, agile workforces, agile workers, agile org design, and agile work practices. So, moving away from those traditional models, from hierarchical structures to more flexible work practices. So when we look and talk about reinventing for sustainability, it's no longer just a case of doing things which are good for now. It's what's going to keep you relevant in the future. And you'll see that the number one priority that came out was defining future workforce needs or restructuring for sustainability. Second, being reinventing for sustainability to keep you relevant for the longer term, and energizing the employee experience, which is very, very high on the agenda. Now, 59% of companies actually have plans in place or plan to increase the use of variable or contingent talent pools in 2021. Now, you'll see forecasting skills. Traditionally, we implemented digital technology, and that implementation dictated what training the workforce required. That is no longer the case. Now, you'll see when we talk about interconnected transformations, we're talking about digital technology strategies, workforce strategy design, and continuous workforce training. So it's no longer a once off effort. This is a continuous effort, and it will continually evolve based on the organization's needs, but also based on the industry in which you function. So we asked our participants what skills were the most critical or have become more critical over time. And you'll see collaboration actually is the number one skill, which was highlighted by 63% of our participants. Self-management and prioritization skills, because as we saw, individuals are experiencing burnout as a result of the workload and not being able to take breaks in between. And you'll see inclusive and empathetic management. Now, when we talk about the employee experience, managers and people managers are also employees, but they were never really trained to manage employees online. So organizations took note of this and now actively working towards helping leadership help employees to move through this journey that we're on, which we've never planned for. And you'll see at the bottom of the slide, those are the average budgets that are spent across the world per employee. So, as organizations, HR had this unfair accountability to always have the answers for every people related topic. And organizations and leading organizations have now realized that this has become an organization wide accountability. So it's not just HR, it's the employees, it's people managers, and it's the executives who actually need to ask themselves these questions. So, how do you identify skills needed for the future? This is not just HR, it's HR working collaboratively with the business to understand what's needed. How do you restructure around skills? How quickly can you redeploy people into roles? And how do you respond to changes to value those skills? How do you reward skills in the future? So, these are the questions that organizations actually should be asking themselves in order to address the skills based approach to the new world of working. So, if we look at what trends have accelerated in 2021, you'll see that urgency to build more flexible models, meaning that employees again need to move into a more consultative role rather than this is my job description. They need to build and acquire new skills for digital competence and increase skills driven hiring, which is often unhooked. And what are leading companies doing? So you'll see that they're building a skills infrastructure, but also a big emphasis on building a learning culture. So employees should want to learn, they should be able to continuously learn and grow within the organization. Creating transparency. So it shouldn't be a secret. So when an organization understands what skills they have and what skills they need for the future, this should be shared with employees so that employees can also take the initiative to learn and grow within that space. And rethinking how organizations reward skills of the future. So that's it from me, Joel. I'm going to hand over back to you. Thank you.
Very much, Tesantha. I think that really sets the scene nicely for our panel discussion, and I think we're all ready to hear how those global trends and the things that come out of the report sort of relates to what we're seeing in South Africa. Yeah, we can switch cameras on. I will say to the other panelists, and I actually wanted to start with Njabulo. Vodacom is definitely a trendsetter in the South African HR space, and I think when we were preparing, you shared some great insights around digital, around collaboration when it comes to reskilling. So I thought maybe we can start with you running us through some of your reskilling philosophy at Vodacom.
Thanks, Joel. I'm not sure if you can help me with the camera. It says the host is the one who switched off my camera, so I don't have full control. Okay, there we go. I've been given the power back. Yes.
There you go. Okay, fantastic. Naughty host. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, I think really at its core, our reskilling philosophy and agenda has been driven by an attempt to future-proof our employees' potential. So definitely a big focus on reskilling and upskilling to prepare for the changes that we see in our industry, in our organization, So globally across Vodafone, we're really looking at the transformation from being a traditional telecoms organization to being what we call a tech co, which is really a technology company. And that means that we then had to rethink and relook at the skill set that we have now versus what we will need in the future. So I think when you refer to us being known as a leader, it really talks to phase one, which started just over a year ago, where we really focused on what we called #OneMoreSkill. And it was really around looking at the gaps that we have now, looking into the future, and taking a deep dive at a systemic level, really saying which jobs are impacted. So really jobs that will disappear in the future, which are affected. So those would change. So parts of those roles would remain. And then also what was just the general capability that we then needed in terms of looking at the organization to be able to exist in this new technology space that we haven't been a part of before. And it's really been in partnership with the business in terms of then taking a three-step approach, looking at current roles, looking at aspirations, very much informed as well by future capabilities. So looking at 4 IR skills, we identified 14 in particular, everything from big data analytics, what will agile mean for us, software engineers, very big on our agenda, and 14 other capabilities where we really said, how do we build the skills? And how do we bring people along? Because I think the reskilling emergency, I think, as painted out by Tesantha, but also if you look at other research, World Economic Forum, when you look at what we see happening globally around us, it can set a bit of panic. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted to be proactive, and hence the philosophy around let's have an exploratory approach as well in terms of what are the skills of the future? How do we make them accessible for people? And so we took an approach where we built a framework where there was a formal component. So through, again, what we call our internal Vodacom University, very much a learning and development initiative around formal courses. People could actually take programs online, participate, apply their skills, and be able to come out with a certification. For example, I'm an engineer and I've got skills in X, Y, Z. We also had self-paced learning. So just people who are curious, what is cybersecurity about? We've had webinars. So we've had a mix really of formal, informal, self-paced learning. And we've achieved quite a lot, especially considering the pandemic year last year. When we look at our stats, so just looking at some of our stats, we've had 61,000 online courses that have been completed, which would mean when you look at our headcount, which is around 5,000, at the very least, one person has done something if you were to average it out. Of course, there's areas like our technology functions where there was a much deeper focus and you could link current roles to the future. We've had people certified in each of those different capabilities that I've mentioned. But what we're now doing, which is the next phase, it's really around let's link that to future career paths. So we've now had we've had time to see our future operating models, what the organization might look like, and so we are more easily able to then start to translate to. It's fine for everyone to run around, get that certification. Firstly, we're building the right mindset, thinking about the future, but how do we link these skills now to roles, to career paths? And I think another point which Tesantha mentioned, which is when we look at also the agile way of working, can you link it to assignments? Can you crowdsource solutions where people actually go and actually solve a problem with their new set of skills and go back into another function or another role? So I think it's just a natural evolution. So what we're busy with now is how do we take it to the next level where it actually translates to career paths, and actually I think also getting to what seemed like the scary part, which is really saying what will not exist in the future. And that's really where we are in our journey.
Thanks, Njabulo. I'm sure we'll unpack that a little bit more later. Elizabeth Rashidi, I think when we chatted to S'ne and yourself, things that came out of your story was very much leadership development, agile also, again, just like at Vodacom, and some terms I'd never heard of, like dojo. So maybe you can illuminate us.
Sure. So I think our journey in terms of reskilling was started about three years ago, where we had to define what we saw as the Tiger brands of the future. And so in doing so, we needed to be quite deliberate in saying, if we need to achieve that ambition, what kind of leaders are going to drive that change for us? And so it really started with saying, how do we almost rewire the mindset of our leaders to say, help us in terms of defining this Tiger of the future, and help us in terms of identifying what are those skill sets that we'll need in the future. And so our journey began. And we started really deliberately looking at profiling what we call kind of the critical pillars that underpin what we saw as the leader of the future. So, we looked at innovation is very core and pivotal as a differentiator in our strategy. So we wanted leaders who had that kind of mindset. So leaders who would drive innovation in our environment, leaders who supported our teams in terms of driving winning performance. But I think also importantly, leaders who were able to leverage the power of cross-functional collaboration through partnerships. So partnerships is quite an important part of what underpins our leadership framework. And then lastly, but certainly not least, are leaders that we call leaders that have quite a high sense of self-mastery and sense of self-awareness. So leading self is one of the other pillars that are quite important and pivotal in our leadership framework. So we began kind of this journey of then defining this, and we supported this then with what we call our leadership programs, development programs. So we have different tiers of leadership programs within the organization that seek to address and support our leadership framework. So programs that are pegged at young leaders. We've got programs that are pegged at kind of what we call frontline leaders, leaders of other leaders, and leaders who are managing the enterprise, right up to our ExCo and our director level teams have got kind of leadership development programs that are designed in terms of changing that mindset around our leaders. I'll give you an example of one of the programs that we have called Game Changer. And our idea around Game Changer is, how do you leverage the power of these leadership capabilities and what we call multiplying behaviors. So if you're familiar with Liz Wiseman's work on diminishing and multiplying behaviors, so we subscribe to that, and it's become quite a lingo in Tiger, where we start calling each other out if we see kind of leaders showing up in diminishing ways. And it's that kind of language that we're really wanting to kind of permeate within the Tiger culture and spaces and environment. So, we're wanting leaders that are engaging. We're wanting leaders that are empathetic, and certainly leaders that can inspire what we call winning performance. But, I think what's also been important, which was very interesting when I saw your presentation, Tess, around agility. I think we've been very self-critical at Tiger around being behind the curve, but I think when I see your stats, I'm a little encouraged in terms of the work that we've started doing now around agile. So having been at Vodacom, as you noted earlier, Joel, quite a lot of interesting work in Njabulo that your team there had started doing in terms of agility. And we've kind of started leveraging that as a philosophy as well now in Tiger. So the dojo, as you mentioned, is kind of our way of stepping into an environment that embraces the mindset of agility. How do we accelerate our strategic priorities in the market? So we actually have identified 2 specific projects that we have kind of applied the agile methodology to. So within a space of 6 weeks. So the last 6 weeks, the teams have really been quite busy in terms of working on 2 projects that soon will come into market, and has been quite a foreign concept initially in Taga. And I think to invite people to step into this dojo, we were met initially with a little bit of resistance because, you know, kind of people weren't really familiar with this kind of thinking. But as we unpacked it and as the team started getting into it, you started seeing the light bulbs going on. You started seeing the creativity, the cross collaboration. And I think that's the beauty of being able to work in this kind of way, is that it's a multi-skilled team. You know, if I borrow from the term that Deloitte often uses of super teaming, which is exactly what we've done with these projects, where we've got people from multiple capabilities working on delivering innovation at an accelerated pace to get to market. So those are kind of some of the things that we've done in Tiger Brands, just in terms of defining and looking at leadership as a way of rewiring or reskilling our teams.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And hopefully later we'll have a bit of time to unpack what reskilling means at a shop floor level as well, because I also found that really, really interesting. Let's move from Joburg to Nairobi quickly and go to Elizabeth Waititu. Yeah, thank you for waiting patiently to listen to all the South Africans babble on. You told us that the COVID-19 pandemic has really accelerated your reskilling efforts. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Thank you very much indeed, Joel, for having me on the panel, and the Mercer team as well. Thank you. Proud to be representing East Africa today and happy to be at this party. Yes, indeed, the pandemic did accelerate our need to reskill. And I would summarize the need in just in what I would look at a coaching framework. We took a coaching framework as our way of harnessing the change that was required. And indeed, the other panelists have spoken about some of the things that they have done that are similar to what we are doing. Elizabeth of Tiger Brands has talked about the shift in mindset. And I think that for us was the biggest thing, that we realized immediately with the pandemic that our challenge was shifting our mindsets, and both at the level of leadership, but also at individual performer level. And the leaders needed to make the mindset shift to see the workforce as our people, as people who would be able to work independently and remotely without necessarily needing to have somebody looking over their shoulders. And the false sense of comfort that we had as leaders, that, because somebody was seated at their desk, they were actually productive, was quickly needed to be addressed, because that bubble was burst. And so we had to begin by reskilling our leaders, taking them through forums and sessions to address their fears, and then identifying practical ways of supporting them through the change that needed to be done to give them comfort that all was well. So finding the right tools to measure productivity at that point was just a beginning, and increasing the frequency of meeting teams. We also did see a big need to again equip our leaders with the change skills, managing in a volatile sort of space, ambiguity where you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Things are big. We are having lockdowns. We've been reaching our customers physically. What do we do now? And so, thinking on your feet quickly and being able to actually bring about meaningful change. And then the skill of empathy, just ensuring that our leaders remained empathetic to our staff as we focused on how do we keep productivity at the top of mind. We also had to recognize that everybody was going through change, and it was important that we all took it in stride. The leaders were going through change, but they needed to provide change leadership. And so quick partnerships with the, especially organizations that had experience and good track record in managing teams remotely helped us to be able to equip our leaders that way. At the individual staff level, also we had to create that sort of mindset shift for them to appreciate that they now need to work without, direct oversight. And so also helping them to learn how to manage in a remote space, how to reach out and collaborate. We realized that collaborative skills were now very important, provided the tools to collaborate. So of course, Zoom came to our rescue very quickly, but later on tools like MS Teams became our collaboration centers. And so people were able to make the shift and know that they can still reach their colleagues through the tools that we provided. So mindset shift was the first critical thing that we needed to do. We also realized that on our journey to reskill and look at what the future does for the organization, we needed to listen intently, listen to what our staff were saying, but as well our customers most critically. And based on the listening and the hearing of what was now important, that we were able to then begin to create the future that was inevitable with the change that was thrust to us, globally. And then the next step was really just getting curious about how do we then harness this, having listened to our customers and our staff, how do we harness it all? And from a reskilling perspective, what we looked at and looking at statistics and data is that most of our skills that we have today will be obsolete in the coming years. So we began to look at the skills that are needed in the future workplace. And some of the ones that have been spoken about here, digitization for us came out tops. We are in the insurance industry, and typically a very traditional industry. In Kenya, our penetration in the market is quite low at just about 3% right now. I think South Africa has the highest in terms of market penetration. So for us, it's both the vast potential that we have as an industry to then harness our market, but also to apply skills, future skills around digitization. The customer today wants fast, convenient, and low touch, almost sort of product and service offerings. So we've seen that digitization is a big area of opportunity for us. We've put up a department that focuses on digital products, and that is the one department that has grown in terms of headcount in the time that we have between when the pandemic hit and today. We saw a need for our developers and UI and UX engineers, and these are the kind of skills that we are now investing in and developing in. Now, to help the organization generally begin to create those skills of the future around our Getting Curious agenda is really to also offer opportunities to learn to everybody, where you're not just focusing on your current skill requirements for your technical role, but you're also thinking about, given the way the world is moving and the skills required for the future, what else can you do? What else can you add on to your skills repertoire? And so partnering with the learning organizations such as LinkedIn Learning and Skillsoft to be able to provide platforms where there is almost an endless supply of learning, and we have categorized them into those that we have anchor learning areas that everybody in the organization must go through. And then we have your technical areas of learning that you must go through. And then we have aspirational areas of learning. And of course, we are able to measure through the reports that we get out of the system to ensure that we have a learning organization. So that was through the Get Curious. And then now we are looking at what next. We are just beginning. I know that we say it's a race to reskilling. And, there's almost an oxymoron to it, because reskilling, there are skills that you can't get overnight. You have to take time to build them. And if you want to race, you're probably better off buying those that are already ready, made skills. But we are looking at a long game of building these skills over time. And so we've looked at Agile. And I want to say that we haven't gotten into any of these spaces yet, but that my panelists who went before me have actually spoken to the aspirational sort of learning that we are looking into as an organization.
Thank you. I like that emphasis on the long game. Njabulo in the beginning also was saying, don't panic. This is not something that we're going to fix in the next 2.5 days. Very interesting to hear 3 very different stories, but I think partnerships and collaboration coming out of all of those as sort of keywords, and I think also on the top of some of your lists, Tesantha. So that's quite interesting. I'm quickly launching a poll just for everyone to get engaged again into in a different way in this webinar. And the good news is there's this time there are no wrong answers as opposed to the previous poll. So it's really, this is about you. Which of the following skills-based practices is top of the agenda for your organization? So these are not mutually exclusive, but just pick the top one, and it'll give us some good awesome things to talk about later. Maybe just Tesantha in the meantime, what sort of stood out for you listening to the panelists? Are these sort of similar things you're picking up from other clients?
Definitely, Joel, and it's so nice to hear from the different organizations, and they focused on similar but very different things at the same time. Also important to note that they're all on the journey, so it's not like they haven't started and they've prioritized based on their organization's needs. And Joel, to answer your question, I mean, what we're seeing from our clients and the discussions we're having is that a lot of organizations want to actually know what skills they have in their organization today, as a start. So it's sort of like a skills audit. And then the next request we're getting is, what are the most critical skills linked to jobs? And it's not just about the technical skills, but also the softer skills. So when we talk about collaboration, how important has collaboration become over the last 1.5 years? And then another big topic is that pay for skill. So how do we start rewarding individuals for those unique skills, so that they know that they're also valued, and the skill is valued? And it's also sort of a motivation factor, in terms of like, why should I grow as an individual? Like, what is the value add for me? So Joe, those were just the top 3 things that have been coming out quite often.
Thanks very much, Tesantha. I mean, Elizabeth Rashidi, we spoke yesterday actually in preparation for this webinar, and we've spoken a lot about leadership and about sort of big concepts like agile, etc. But there are also, especially in businesses where there's a lot of manual labor, there's also another tension going on with the digitization coming in and people being scared of losing their jobs, etc. And this is very much a daily business for you in HR at Tiger Brands. So maybe talk us a little bit through those academies and the sort of the approach that you have at Tiger Brands to deal with that kind of reskilling.
Yeah. So Joel, you asked a question earlier just around shop floor development. So our reskilling has taken different facets, right? So if I start with shop floor development, we've been quite deliberate in identifying which are those spaces in our operations that we call kind of priority lines or priority areas where in the future we will be looking at automating some of our manufacturing lines. In certain instances, we actually have already started doing so. So we've been deliberate in putting together what we call our Supply Chain Academy. And within our Supply Chain Academy, the focus is specifically on reskilling our shop floor colleagues. So it has looked at doing assessments, so capability assessments. So again, specific requirements that we've said, in order for you to be able to operate this kind of a machine, these are the skills that you require. So we've done capability assessments across actually most of our sites. And we've been able to, with a level of accuracy, being able to say, this is where we are sitting in terms of our competencies, in terms of our capabilities, and then designed the Supply Chain Academy to actually address those. So artisan development, for example, is something that's absolutely key for us. Developing our engineering skills has been an area that we've identified as quite key. core to our values is what we call empowered accountability. And it's really one of kind of our winning stories, if you may, in terms of how we've actually made that come alive on the shop floor. So we've created what we call self-directed teams on the shop floor. So areas where we've got what we call autonomous operators, where teams are actually managing themselves without necessarily the need of supervisors or team leaders directing the work that they've done. That requires a particular skill set. So the work that we've done is putting together a program, for example, called LIFT. And LIFT has been designed specifically to address exactly the skills that these self-directed teams or autonomous operators require in order for them to manage themselves, I guess, on the shop floor. So that's kind of what we've done in that respect. In the other parts of the organization, we've looked at what are the skills that we need to get us in terms of really achieving our ambition of being Africa's leading food manufacturer. So marketing has been an area we've looked at, sales has been an area we've looked at, and I've spoken about supply chain. We've then gone in terms of saying, how do we build academies that address these specific skill gaps? So our academies have in the main approached the development of these programs in the same way. So we've looked at assessments that we've done with all our teams. So to your point that you've just raised in our tests in terms of, do we know the skills that we have? I can with confidence actually say we do know the skills that we have, and we do know what are the gaps that we have. So our competency assessments have been quite robust in terms of saying, these are the competencies we require for you to operate as a winning sales force. These are the competencies you require to be the commercial marketeer that we need. We are a consumer-led brand, so we are looking for marketeers that are more commercially astute, and we've defined what those competencies are and built academies and programs to try and address the skills in that way. And then obviously the other area is around research and development. But I mean, you know, there's quite a lot that we can talk about. I mean, digital enablement is a big area for us. So a lot of our learning has moved on to digital platforms. So we've leveraged capabilities such as Udemy, you know, in terms of encouraging learning on digital platforms.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think the risk of having a panel of 4 superstars like this is that you feel the webinar is probably about two hours too short because there's so much to talk about and there's questions popping in on the chat. I actually do want to give preference to the right of way, so to say, to the questions in the chat, because it's great to engage with the community. Njabulo, I wanted to reroute Dumisani's question to you. He's asking about the growing demand for team coaching and skills that enhance the group or the team's performance. Just maybe getting your take on that comment from Dumisani.
Just to be clear on the question, so the impact of team coaching or the demand.
Yeah, exactly. And do you agree that there's an increased use and an increased demand for it as part of the skills development?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that's highlighted with the, I think, changes in terms of the capabilities of the future is this whole focus also on collaboration. I think just the agile methodology has led us into that, and which is interesting because it also has a cultural impact. But coming back to the question, there's definitely benefit in team coaching. We find that there's more of a need for it as we break silos, as we start to think around collaboration, starting to work in the teams, the project teams that we have, the agile teams that we're formulating. It challenges people to come out of their traditional silos and being able to also step in and out of various teams. So that's a very practical thing that helps to facilitate a different culture to grow in.
Very much.
We losing you, Joel? Sorry.
I'm at the poll. Sorry, I was battling with the poll was in my way. I don't know, for some reason I took up my whole screen. Sorry about that. Elizabeth Waititu, there's a question from Kelechi that I just wanted to reroute through you with her permission, I know, so she'll be fine with it. Great emphasis in highlighting the role of the leader but how do you ensure that the rest of the workforce is not left behind in the upskilling race, so to say? Well, you've already said it's going to be a long race, but maybe talk us through sort of the upskilling for the different levels, like your fellow Elizabeth also spoke about.
Yes, thank you. So besides the leaders, we also have focused on the staff, and what I mentioned earlier about the opportunity to reskill for technical, for futuristic skills, and for career growth is what we have provided to all our staff. And this is a very structured and targeted growth model from our learning and development side, where we have identified the needs that our staff have today, but as well we are looking at the future skills that we require. So the partnership, I think I mentioned that we have with the LinkedIn and Skillsoft is really to give everybody in the organization that opportunity. As well as a coaching approach that we have taken in both skilling the managers, but also in skilling them, we are also ensuring that they are using these skills to grow and develop their teams. And the plan is also to train our staff to know how to make the most of the coaching opportunities that are available to them through their line managers. So yeah, that is part of our journey.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And there were also a bunch of questions, at least two that I just wanted to pose to Tesantha quickly, maybe for a short answer. Maybe, I don't know if you have a take on this, but Nazneen is asking small businesses that have less than 50 employees, what should their approach to reskilling be? Is it possible? And what should they focus on? I don't know if that's something that you work on as well.
Yeah, and Joel, it's a good question. Thanks, Nazine. I think every company should be looking at it at the moment. And again, the key is to understand what you have, but also from a business strategy perspective, understanding where the business is going in the future. And I mean, we've seen we can't have a 5-year plan anymore. We have to be prepared to be flexible and agile because that plan is going to change continuously. So just understanding where your business plans to go in the future. I mean, and Njabulo, like they were quite clear at Vodacom, they're moving from telco to tech. So where is your organization moving and what skills do you need linked to that future strategy? So as a starting point, I guess, understand what you have and then understand where that gap is. And also important to understand what capabilities and competencies your employees have, because give them that opportunity to actually learn and grow. Don't just go outside and purchase the skill without actually enabling your employees to learn and grow in the organization. So definitely possible, Joel.
Thanks. And yeah, another question from Stevens was, how do South Africa and Africa do in the race for reskilling compared to the rest of the world? And this is obviously something that you could maybe deduce from your reports. And also, is there a particular industry leading this transformation?
So I wouldn't say there's a particular a big difference, so to speak. So Stevens, to answer your question, the big difference between the priorities from an executive perspective was that executives in South Africa highlighted that HR transformation was the #1 priority, whereas globally, learning was the #1 priority. Sorry, and then the second part of the question, Joel.
Difference between industries.
So telcos and definitely banking. Definitely leading the industry at the moment. And when I say banking, I'm including insurance, Elizabeth, just because they've been on this digital transformation journey for years now, whereas the other industries are basically just starting and have started. So definitely those two industries.
And then obviously one of the challenges in HR is always how do we make sure this is not an HR project, but how do we make sure this is carried by the business and this is lived by everyone, and that is where HR is the enabler rather than someone who tells everyone, now we're going to do this, because we're going to reskill. So just maybe just a quick 1-minute answer from all the HR directors here on the calls. I'll start with you, Njabulo. How do you make sure business makes this their projects?
Yeah, I think, and from the beginning, it's really to co-create with them. I think linking it to the business strategy definitely helps, and understanding that the capability is the critical how, and people to be able to realize the strategy that we have in mind. So for us, it's been, even when we've been re-looking at the operating models, defining what the future looks like, co-creating that with Line, and then also going through the prioritization process with them in terms of how to partner. And that helps a lot, I think, in terms of then also accepting the results, the ownership and directing and being a part of that.
Thanks, Njabulo. Actually, there's another question coming in just now from Violet or Violette, which I just want to read. How do we ensure we create a learning culture in our respective businesses so our reskilling constantly remains future focused? And this is the thing, right? Like and it's also what Elizabeth Waititu sort of referred to. This is the long game. It's about creating a learning culture rather than coming up with a solution for one problem. So maybe just to go to Kenya, and then we'll go to Tiger Brands, and then we're probably out of time. But your learning culture, Elizabeth Waititu, how do you establish that?
Yeah, so the learning culture is that we're establishing is through really ensuring that one, that staff are learning based on their needs, as I mentioned, but also linking the learning to actual outcomes in the organization. So where we've gone through certain learning, got certification, we are also linking that to your career growth and development. We are linking that to rewards and privileges. We are linking that to opportunities to say be part of certain project teams that are put together for deliverables, key deliverables. So we bring it alive by ensuring that when you're learning, you're also applying that learning very quickly, and you're also being recognized for that learning, because we want to say, hey guys, we must keep learning. That is the only currency to the future. Education and the experience has a shelf life. If we are not keeping it going, then we're going to find ourselves in a bad space. So really, it's bringing it alive, rewarding, acknowledging, celebrating, learning as the staff continue to learn, and also ensuring that we are always, focusing. I think the previous panelist did mention about co-creating with the business, aligning to strategy, so that we are not just training or having people go through learning that doesn't have an output and a place of being applied, but that they're actually seeing the actual results. In the insurance industry, I think you know that actuaries are our core. We need our actuarial skills, and one of the things we do is that we really incentivize learning around the actuarial, and the kind of courses they have to do and the exams they have to take are tough. And so just to ensure that they keep learning, we actually do give them incentives. When they pass that paper, we pay them a token, and they get a promotion into a different level. So that keeps that learning, the interest in learning, and seeing the practical application immediately.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Rashidi, last one. How do you create your learning culture?
Yeah, so I think, Joe, for us, what's been key is just demonstrating that learning isn't only about meeting business requirements or business needs. It's really also about how do we enrich the basket of skills that you already have, and we've done that quite successfully through our talent mobility programs and career move programs, where people can demonstrate tangibly the ability to actually stretch and gain new capabilities and skills through different experiences. So that's one way that we've created a learning culture.
As I said, we could talk about a lot more things, and we will in future webinars. But we also need to be respectful of each other's time. And I'm going to thank you all for joining. First of all, to the attendees, it was really fantastic having you here to come to reskill yourself and to learn yourself. And then, of course, our panelists, Tesantha Naidoo, Elizabeth Rashidi, Elizabeth Waititu, and Njabulo Mashigo. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. It's really appreciated. Thanks to Mercer for making this possible. And if there's anyone in the audience who wants to be in touch with anyone, that's what we do as an organization. We connect people and we make sure that that we can partner and that we can collaborate, as we spoke a lot about in the previous hour. So let me quickly share my screen. So you probably know that this is the webinar you were in, but now I'm also going to tell you that this is going to be the next webinar for the CHRO community. And it's on the 30th of June at 12 o'clock. So if you want to sign up for that one and you haven't yet, move to the website chro.co.za/events, and you can talk about lockdown fatigue. I've got a great panel there as well. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and I hope to see you all in person soon.